We can get started. So I'm Elizabeth with Senator Warner's office, and we are thrilled to have you. This is the second session of the Women's Conference, and this is Tiffany, who is Vice President at the American Association of University Women, and you are currently getting your doctorate.
I just finished.
You just finished? Well, congratulations. And this is Work Smart, salary negotiation. So take it away.
Thank you so much. I have the mic on. For those of you in the back, I always say, always just use the mic. Is it overpowering or is it fine with the mic? Okay, great. So as Elizabeth said, thank you. My name is Tiffany Sanchez, and I'm the Vice President of Programs and Fellowships at AAUW, or the American Association of University Women. AAUW, as you may know, has been around since 1881. We're one of the oldest equity organizations in the world. Since 1881, we have been fighting for advocating for women in higher education. We actually began our work at AAUW with our very first research project, which was designed to disprove the myth that women who sought higher education would become infertile. So thank goodness we proved that wrong, and here I am with 3 of my own children and just received my doctoral degree, so really glad that we did that work. So if you're just coming in, go ahead and take a moment just to go to this QR code so that you can fill out our pre-workshop survey. So that is the survey, and then this is the workbook. And during an in-person presentation, when we have a little bit more time, we often will do this as facilitated workshop, where we might have opportunities for folks to work together and come up with, do some of the activities that we are going to be talking about today. I won't have time to do that today because we have only 50 minutes. So I'm basically going to walk you through all of this content, and then I'll give you directions on how to access our Work Smart online program, which is the place where you can actually delve into this a little bit deeper. And that's also, we won't have slides available for you, but you can access all of the same information in our Work Smart online program. All right, so as I mentioned, AAUW, one of the oldest equity organizations in the world, we have almost 170,000 members, donors, and supporters that are connected to AAUW, and that's all over the United States. We have about 1,000 local branches and partnerships with almost 400 colleges and universities. Economic security for women is really at the core of our work here at AAUW. We address and advocate for change in policy and employer culture, and we empower individual women through sessions like this to negotiate for fair and equitable pay. Our mission, as you may know, is to advance gender equity for women and girls through research, education, and advocacy. So again, welcome. Today we're going to walk through 4 parts of our session. The first is we're going to talk a little bit about why there is a gender pay gap. The second is we'll talk about what AAUW's Work Smart program salary negotiation steps are, so I'll walk you through those. Third, I'll tell you more about our Work Smart online program. And fourth, I will help you know about how to stay in contact with AAUW. Oh, and before we get started, I want to mention I'm here with my colleague, Deborah McCall. She is our program manager at AAUW at the national office. Deborah just started work with us in March, and she's here observing so that she can get ready to do these sessions on her own. So thank you, Deborah, for being here. All right. Negotiation is actually a very important skill. And negotiation is one of the things that we use daily in our lives, right? And we've all been doing this since we were very, very small, right? If any of you have ever seen a toddler begging for a cookie after dinner, or a teenager who wants to stay up a little bit past their bedtime, you know that negotiation is something that we do just all the time, right? The purpose of these workshops is to help you harness that innate skill that you have to empower you to successfully and confidently negotiate your salary and benefits packages, and also to help ensure that your compensation is aligned with your worth and value in the job market. A lot of us feel that we have to fight to get the things that we need. AAUW really works hard to end those battles. We have been, since 2017, AAUW has trained almost 200,000 women in workshops like this, in virtual webinars, and via our online program, Work Smart Online. We also partner regularly with local and state governments nonprofits, for-profit businesses, and academic institutions to deliver this curriculum. We also have an amazing policy arm here at AAUW, and that arm is really working to advocate for policy changes at the federal and state level, which will then also help to alleviate some of these concerns that come with the pay gap. We know that it takes advocating for change as well as working with employers to provide women and also to provide women with the skills that we need in order to change and close that pay gap. The reason that we're working to bring these negotiation workshops to communities across the US. According to the World Economic Forum, it will take over 200 years for us to end the pay gap. This is an issue that can affect women as early as their first job and can follow them all the way through retirement, where we know, if you've seen some of those TIAA CREF commercials recently, we know that more women live in poverty in retirement. We are bringing these tools to you because we want you to feel empowered to advocate for yourselves in your own career to overcome any pay gap that you may already be experiencing. Before we get into the meat of our conversation, I want to just share with you briefly about some of the research that AAUW did related to the pandemic and how that has contributed to women's financial insecurity. In August of 2021, AAUW contracted with the public opinion research firm Ipsos to poll women in the New York City region about how they fared economically during the pandemic. There were 723 women that were surveyed, and they were representative of women in the 5 boroughs in terms of race, age, education, and income. The results of the survey really demonstrated how women were already feeling financially insecure, and some of them even unable to meet basic expenses, even before the pandemic pushed folks into much more difficulty. While those living in New York City and other high-cost cities face some unique challenges, their experiences before and after the pandemic provide us with a very interesting view into the national landscape for women, and then about how so many women can fall so easily into financial hardship. I also like to point out, we reported in this document that 3 million women have left the workspace since the beginning of the pandemic. Many of us have gone back to work now, but during the pandemic, that leaving the workforce was because in so many cases, women were shouldering the burden of having to care for loved ones, for children, when schools and daycares were closed. The pandemic really strengthened AAUW's commitment to supporting all women in the workplace, and we continue to be a strong proponent for legislation at state and federal levels to ensure protections for workers. The findings from our 2021 research underscore the need for a full range of programs and policies and services to help women not just survive, but to thrive. So let's start our program today by looking closely at addressing why we're here. So the gender pay gap, as many of you know, is how we describe inequity in what men and women are paid nationally. Women working full-time, on average, are paid only 82 cents for every dollar that's earned by a man. According to the National Women's Law Center, lifetime losses over a 40-year career are devastating. And this slide always makes me think, as I was coming up the road today on my way in, all those signs for play the lottery, right? Women overall are losing about $400,000 over the course of a 40-year career compared to men. Black women lose almost $1 million over the course of a 40-year career, and Latinas are losing $1.16 million over the course of a career as compared with white men. If you think about planning for your financial retirement, right? They always say, save up $1 million. How hard is that to do when you're already playing from a playing field that is not level, right? We shouldn't have to play the lottery to be able to earn what we deserve. These lost wages mean that women and their families have less money to support themselves, save and invest for the future, pay down debt, and spend on goods and services. Families, businesses, and really the whole economy suffers as a result of this. Women of color are also disproportionately affected by the pay gap, so it's not really just gender, it's race as well that has an impact on women's wages. So if you look at this slide, this is all data from our website at aauw.org that talks about the gender pay gap. where we examine these issues in detail. And you can see on the left, the race ethnicity chart there. This will tell you a percentage of what generally speaking women in each of these racial and ethnic categories are making as compared to white men. So white non-Hispanic women are 79%, Asian women 87%, and then it goes down from there. So Black and African American women, 63% of what white men make, 63% for Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, 60% for American Indian or Alaskan Native, and 55% for Hispanic and Latino women. This chart, again available on our website, demonstrates how long it will take for each of these identities to achieve pay equity. And if you look, 2451 seems like a really long time to wait for that kind of equity. And each of those is color-coded here on the bottom. All right, I want to talk just a little bit specifically about Black women and the pay gap. This is really true for all races and ethnicities, but the pay gap starts early. From age 18, Black girls are paid less than boys the same age. And that gap only grows from there, right? When you think about how compounding interest works, compounding pay gap is the same. So if you start out making less money and someone knows how much you made at your last job, that earning less is going to continue to follow you all the way through your career. The pay and wealth disparities that Black women face affect not only individuals, but the people around them. And that's because 80% of Black mothers are the sole, or primary breadwinners for their households. That means that household is earning less than they could be in another situation. Black women also ask for promotions and raises at about the same rates as white women and men, but there's a broken rung that holds women back from that first critical step to manager. The stat is for every 100 men promoted to manager, only 58 Black women are promoted to manager. So Black women and girls really do live at the intersection of sexism and racism. So let's talk a little bit about what contributes to the gender pay gap, stereotypes and the double bind. Stereotypes, discrimination, and bias, all based on race, ethnicity, sex, migration status, have all intersected to funnel women into lower paying occupations and to deny them fair wages for their work. We just met with a group from Japan. Deborah was there at that meeting, and we talked a lot about a number of women in high-paying jobs. So when you think about women in STEM, for example, there are fewer women in STEM-related fields where salaries are higher. So women are more likely to do, if you look at the numbers, women are more likely to hold jobs such as education, healthcare provider, where those salaries are lower. So again, it's how our culture values the different kinds of jobs that we have in our culture and where we start funneling women from a very early age, right? Even schoolgirls. There's also something called the double bind, which represents the conflicting demands that women receive around behavioral expectations, especially at work. Women often have two choices, right? We can either be seen as likable or competent, right? And so if women who are seen as very, very competent, sometimes they're not likable, right? Right, not likable. Or if they're seen as likable, maybe they are not seen as competent. When women step outside of this cultural expectation and we're assertive and we advocate for ourselves, a lot of times we're seen as intimidating, right? And that is a big problem. And we see this factor play out across all sectors of our community. We see it in politics. We see it in education. We see it in business and entrepreneurship. Sometimes having a strong leadership style as a woman, like I said, is intimidating to others. In negotiating for salary and promotions, this factor can make negotiations a lot more difficult for women. And we need to be seen as competent and likable in order to get what we want. We also know at AAUW that we cannot negotiate our way around these biases and discrimination that are baked into the system. And that's why, again, we work to fix inequitable systems that actually keep women from thriving. So let's get into this a little bit. I want you to take just a moment, just a quick reflective moment, to think about your biggest challenges or fears when it comes to negotiation. And it could be, if it's not a salary negotiation, maybe it's about something else. Maybe you're starting a business, right? What is your biggest fear about asking for that big loan to start a business? So just take a moment to reflect on that. Anybody have one they want to share? Yes.
I actually just went through that this summer, and I'm
Yeah.
sitting here thinking about it all over again. I was, for 3 years, I've been a department chair for 8 years.
Okay.
3 years ago, I took on interim assistant dean on top of that. And so they kept wanting to promote other people around me. Even a white man that I hired as department chair ended up taking that position, even though, bottom line.
We get it. You're among
But,
friends.
and he told me himself, he said he really didn't want the position, but I'm holding it for you because I'm gonna retire from here. Great guy, but I digress. So, anyway, when it came this year, when they finally decided, we want you to be the assistant dean, but can you stay in department chair for a little bit longer until we can find a replacement? So I said, okay, no problem. Thinking that was gonna be a couple months or whatever. Well, when it came time to I already knew that I was gonna ask for a pay increase to take that job, so I asked for 10%, what I was already making. So they granted it, of course, it was, but we want you to take 5% now, and we get the other 5% when it's time for our new contract that we have here. So I was like, you know what, I'll play your game fine. So it was also time for our annual merit increase, which was based on, for me, was based on my department chair role. Well, when it came time and I got my new contract, I did see my additional 5% for taking on this assistant dean, so I got my total 10%. But I was told, you can't get the other 5% for your merit increase. I said, why not? Oh, well, when you take a promotion, you're no longer eligible for your merit increase. And I said, okay, I will concede that because of the promotion to assistant dean, but I never left this other position, nor did my contract say interim.
Right.
I was full on both.
Yeah.
So, and I was told, not only by the male, which was annoying in itself, but it was the female. Who happens to be Black, that really is the point, you're female.
Right.
And when I wanted to challenge, to speak to higher administration, and so for some reason, I wasn't given the benefit of that meeting with the hired person. For some reason, she was pulled into it, along with my immediate supervisor, which for me, you're stepping on my right to go with the change. So that was that. I got in this meeting before we went there, she says to me, why are we here? I said, well, because I have questions about the fact that I'm not here for marriage. And she says to me, she's just gonna tell you what I was told. I said, perhaps. And what happened is, he did, right? And he told me I was being unreasonable. So the fear, the fear was not going on. So the fear was not asking for what I deserved, because I knew. But my fear was going in there and not coming off with the angry black woman.
Absolutely.
And all this attitude, right? So I literally had to pray
Before you went in, yes.
And I remember sitting there in all three of them, and I said to myself, wow. So the highest person at the level said, what can we do to keep you?
We can do my 5%.
Right.
That's what you did.
And he's like, well, I mean, we're not gonna do the 5%. So I looked at him, I said, okay, take the partnership off of me. He was like, no. But I still feel grieved that you're grieved. I just looked at him. So yeah, so that's been sitting with me.
Yes, so I think what I will, and thank you for sharing that story. I mean, I think that unfortunately this is all too common. And I think you raise a couple of really good points, and we're gonna talk a little bit about this, is about the strategy around when you make your ask, right? And I think you brought up a very good point. I worked in higher ed for 25 years before I came to AAU. AAUW, is the very tiny details that come in about, right, like that 90-day window when you've had a promotion. If you don't, how do you strategize? If you know that rule, do you strategize to get your promotion done, 120 days before that, so that you're then eligible? So all of those things come into play, right? And we don't know what we don't know. And a lot of times you wouldn't necessarily know that until you've been through it. So we'll talk a little bit about the strategy of when to make an ask. I also think you bring up such an important point that race and ethnicity plays into this constantly. And you were dealing with a cultural issue in that moment that you knew how you would be perceived if you were to really stand up for yourself, just exactly like what we said. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's a really good example. A lot of common, there are basically the point of this slide is just to share, it is scary to do this, right? A lot of people say, I'm afraid that they'll rescind the offer. I'm afraid that I will be seen as not a team player. I'm afraid that I'll look like I'm just a money grabber, right? I'm worried that my new boss won't like me if I ask for more money, or it could cause me to have a bad relationship right off the bat. I think the key thing to remember here is that you are not alone in these feelings, and it's very, very normal to have those concerns. But our research shows that particularly for new roles, 70% of employers actually expect applicants to negotiate. And this is a strategy. I've done hiring for the last 20 years, hiring and recruiting and onboarding, and it is a strategy that is used by hiring managers and HR managers everywhere. If I know I have this kind of a range, I'm probably, I hate to admit it, but I'm probably going to lowball my offer just a bit because I think you're going to come back and ask me. If you don't do that, you are leaving money on the table. Ask for an extra $2,000. Ask for an extra $3,000. It's not going to. I recognize that the fears are there, but if 70% of employers are expecting you to negotiate, you're just walking away from having your health insurance paid for a whole year, right? So think about that. Hopefully the skills that we are going to share today are going to help you really be confident in this process so that these fears can be put to bed a little bit. All right, let's get into our negotiation steps. The first one is to know your value. We want you to be able to confidently and articulately share the value that you bring and the contributions that you're going to make to your employer in a way that really resonates with them. For a lot of people, this is going to require a mental shift. A lot of us, as we just talked about, are not comfortable talking about what we're really good at in an interview process or in a negotiation process. We don't want to be seen as bragging, having a big ego, right? We're all worried about being liked. And for some, you might have a cultural norm in your culture about how you were raised that says that you shouldn't talk about your skills and abilities in a way that elevates you, right? And that can make it much more difficult. I will never forget one of my very first job interviews out of grad school. I had been working professionally for about 10 years. And I went to this interview and I said, I'm really good at training. I'm really good at training. And he said, I'm so impressed that you just told me you're really good at training. I said, well, why wouldn't I? I'm really good at it, and this is an interview. I want you to know, that I'm good at it. But the fact that he was surprised let me know that a lot of other women aren't doing that. So be careful about that, right? So that's what this step is about. A couple of tips. We want you to be your own best advocate. You are your own brand. You are out there, just think of it like a sales pitch, right? You are selling something that is totally unique to you. Your personality, your combination of work experience and education, your ethic, your interests, goals, personality, all of that put together is something that no one else can bring to that particular role. So a couple of things that you might want to do as you're, even in your current roles right now, as you're preparing for the next thing, document any accomplishments that you have. You want to keep a journal and update it weekly. I still keep my paper journal. I'm very much a paper pencil person, but a lot of people just keep notes on your phone and the notes app. But make sure that you're documenting everything, especially because you want these things to be able to talk about them later. The next thing is you really want to be able to think beyond your task. Every organization, every institution, every nonprofit has a mission statement and a vision statement and a strategic plan. what are the things that you're doing that are contributing to that larger plan, right? How are you connecting your work to this larger plan? That's gonna demonstrate that you can think about your work in relationship to these other pieces, right? So the very famous story about when Kennedy was doing the moonshot and NASA was working, right? All of NASA was working to get a person on the moon. And they went through and they asked, I think they asked the custodians, what are you doing here? And the custodian says, well, I'm helping to put a man on the moon. So every person, no matter what you do, you are contributing to that larger mission. So make sure that you're keeping track of that. You want to quantify your data whenever you can. This is important. If you have, if you've done a zero-based budget and you saved your organization or your institution money, you want to record how much you saved. If you changed your budgeting practices and you got to a place where you were in the black instead of in the red, you want to write that down. How much, right? If you, you know, whatever it is that you're doing, right? If you created a system that made things a little bit easier in your workplace, you want to quantify how much, you know, what you did and how much you changed things. You want to bring that data to the conversation when you can. Also make sure that everything counts. Women are so much more likely to raise the hand, just like you did. You say, we need help. Yes, I can help you. I can take on that extra role. We're so much more likely to do those extras around the office. Social club, anybody? Setting up the happy hour. All of those pieces matter. Onboarding people, welcoming them, managing the holiday, whatever it is, or the end of semester celebration. Very, very important. All of those things count, and they matter really, really explicitly. The next thing is you want to think about how to take all of those pieces that you've recorded and articulate your value. This is a very simple statement. We all have this information in our daily work. You're all doing this. I accomplished this task by using these skills, which benefited my company in this way. So a value statement is how you share this information in an objective and data-driven way. It should be really tailored to the job that you're applying for or that you're looking at. So let's look at, let's look at a quick example, right? I developed a training program for new hires. That's what you did, that's that accomplishment, right? By using my project management and leadership experience. Those are the skills that you used, which decreased employee turnover by 32%. That's a very easy mathematical solution, right? How many people left last year before that program was developed? How many people left this year, right? And granted, you know, I know statistics and what is it, lies, damn lies and statistics, but really for you, you just want to be able to demonstrate that this was the, you know, attrition rates beforehand, this is the attrition rates after. I am going to claim responsibility that I did that, right? Save the company $22,000 a year in onboarding costs. Again, how much does it cost you to hire a recruiter? The time that it takes to have people interview someone, the onboarding costs, add that up, you know, $22,000 a year in onboarding costs. So as you seek new roles and promotions, or you pursue new projects or opportunities, you want to use these value statements to help tell a story, right? These value statements are the supporting evidence that's going to help you make a case for what you're asking. So sometimes in these workshops, we do have a practice moment. We don't have time for that today, so let's skip through that. Any questions on the value statement before we move to this next piece?
Did you include that in a cover letter?
Absolutely. Yeah, especially if you see the job description, the different pieces of it, if there's something that you've done that you absolutely want to highlight, you should definitely include that in your cover letter. You want to be careful. I mean, industries are so different and level of position is so different. I mean, I think when I was first starting out in my career in higher ed, a one-page cover letter was about all you could do. But now, I mean, I think I had like a 3-page cover letter for my job here at AAUW. So it's just going to depend on levels, and depend on type of organization, and how many of those that you want to include. So other questions on the value statements? Great. The next step is to really prepare yourself with objective market-based research. Almost all employers are going to have a range, a salary range for their jobs, and that means that all jobs are going to have a worth on the market. It doesn't matter how much you earned at your first job, and it doesn't matter how much you earned at your last job. the job that you are applying for has a range, and your target salary, which we're gonna talk about, should be within that range. Your market value is how you determine where you sit on that range and what you're gonna ask for, okay? 3 steps to benchmarking a salary. The first is you wanna research the salary range and benefits. So you wanna take that job that you're looking at, find out what the range is, and then also we'll talk about this more, but talk to an HR representative about what the benefits are in that benefits package for that job that you're looking at. The next thing you wanna do is establish a target salary and put that solid salary in your own range. We'll talk about that a little bit more as well. And then the third is that you wanna determine a walk-away point. I know that not everyone has the privilege of having a walk-away point. Sometimes you just need a job. But a walk-away point is really, really important, especially if you're interviewing for and have possibility of looking at a number of different roles, because you really want to decide among those offers, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Your walk-away point should always be based on the budget too, by the way. All right, so let's provide you some definitions. Target salary is your worth based on objective market-based research, wage data that you're gonna actually go out and hunt for. A salary range is that range that you're gonna use to negotiate with your employer. And your target salary should be the anchor at the bottom of your range. Your walkaway point, as I said, is the absolute lowest salary that you're willing to accept and still reach agreement. I always say during this slide, you're not a successful negotiation doesn't mean that you get the top end of the salary. That's not what you're working for, right? What you're working for is a compromise. You might want the top end of the salary, we all do, but that's not necessary. Sometimes there really isn't money in the budget. Sometimes someone's hands really are tied and there's a policy, right? And we just can't break the policy. Sometimes that happens. So having all of this information together along with the benefits package is really, really helpful. The walkaway point is really designed as a way, it's AAUW's way of helping you to make sure that you don't take a salary that's lower that's gonna put you into a financial difficulty, right? Okay. So a couple of things. How do you figure out what I should ask for, right? Objective market research is gonna help you understand how the market values a specific position. So you wanna look in a few places to gather your data, but here are some tips to get started. We recommend salary.com and payscale.com. Those are both really good resources. They use employer data. So employers will call them and tell them, well not call them, but they'll do a survey to figure out that information. You want to identify comparable job titles, right? So especially if you're changing industries. A program manager role is going to be really different at a nonprofit is going to be really different than that similar role at a university. There's going to be a different title for it. So if you're thinking about switching industries, that's going to be really important. And the third thing, location is key, right? As we all know, living in downtown DC and having an easy commute into the office is going to be very, very different cost of living than living in rural Ohio and walking to your office, right? And I have lived in rural Ohio, so I know that to be true. All right, so those are those tips. So here's just an example from salary.com. If you're ever studied statistics, you know what a standard deviation is, right? So all things being equal, there's usually this big camel hump of data, and there's a median salary that lies in the middle. And what that means is that 50% of the jobs are going to pay more than that median salary, 50% are going to pay less than the median salary. Different organizations, institutions, industries are going to choose to either lead, match, or lag the market. And for corporate, more likely if it's a successful company, they're more likely going to lead the market, right? They know they want great people, they're going to bring those in with those folks in with great money. Nonprofits, higher education, they lag the market. But that's where benefits can really come in and help you to make a really solid choice. Basically that's what you see here. We have the 25 percentile there, so that means that 25% of those jobs are making less than that number, and then you can see the 75%, that means 25% of those jobs are making more than that, okay? So when you're setting a target salary, you want to aim for a number at or above the median, right? I also want to point out that usually when organizations are setting or companies are setting a range, if they want 3 to 5 years of experience and you have 3 years of experience, and if they want a master's degree and you have a bachelor's, you may be on that lower end, right? Because that's how they're trying to pull in the folks, and this is the range that we have. If you have 7 years experience and a master's degree, then you're at the other end, right? So figure out based on, you wanna, kind of think about, your level of experience in education, what you bring to the job, and where that puts you on that range. That'll help you to set that target salary. Once you identify a target salary, you can generally stretch upwards of about 20%, and that's your range. We usually don't recommend having more than a 20% range. So for example, if your target salary is $60,000, you can set your range to be 60 to 70, right? And then where does that sit within the range that they have offered for that particular job? A smaller range might be more appropriate if you have less experience, or if you're really early in your career. If you're setting a salary close to that 75th percentile range, again, you just want to use those value statements to say, this is why I deserve to be at that end. I have this many years experience, this is my demonstrated impact, this is my level of education, all of those pieces. And as we said, your walkaway point should not be much lower than your target salary. And again, make sure that you've done your budgeting on that. I always point out too, health insurance is one of those things that it's going to cost you a different amount at every place. So make sure you're incorporating that into your thinking about what a walkaway point is. And again, we're going to talk a little bit about benefits. Be sure to look at the full package, the benefits package. These are just as important as your salary. Certain benefits, like I said, like health insurance or vacation are usually standard for all employees, but some can be negotiated, right? And there may be different levels. You want to make sure that instead of asking for more of everything on this list, you're being very strategic in your ask, right? What's important to you? Do you have an ailing parent that you need to help to support, right? That may have an impact. And are there sick personal or parental leave options for that? Are you wanting to start a family? What does that look like for you? So keep that in mind. This tuition reimbursement, if you're working at a college or university, I now have high school age children. This is a very important question to me, right? Is that going to be an option? Flex time, I think particularly in the days now of hybrid work environments, is that something that's a benefit? Would you be willing to take a little bit less money so that you could work 3 days from home, for example? All of these different pieces are very, very important. Retirement packages too, right? A lot of places will have a matching plan, so you want to think about that. Sometimes they'll offer more, sometimes they won't. Negotiating benefits is just one way of making a low salary offer a little bit more acceptable to you, right? It's also a way to maximize your value in the negotiation process. If you can, you want to try to get this information as you're going through the process. Talk to an HR representative, look online and see if you can find what the benefits package is. All right, any questions on those pieces? Yes, in the back and then to the front.
I just wanted to know, on your last slide, it said title change.
Oh.
The benefits, what is that?
That's a great question. So this is more likely to come up in a raise or promotion conversation, but say you've been an assistant director or a program associate for a long time, right? A couple of years, and you're really ready for that move up. Sometimes there's only one director in an office, right? So you can't necessarily become the director, but maybe you could ask for an associate director title. So that's one way to manage that. So that can be helpful in a promotion request, but sometimes it could even be helpful in an initial job, like if you're applying for a new job. So you just have to kind of see again what the industry will bear. So good question. Up here in the front, yes.
So my husband is military, so I don't necessarily need health insurance from my employer. Is that something I can leverage? Since that's more of a standard thing most people would be utilizing.
So, possibly, right? Because your institution or organization is likely going to be contributing to the health plan. So you can say, listen, I've done the math, and by not taking your health plan, I'm gonna save you this much money. How about we put that in my salary? So we can try that. One more
I
question.
have a similar question about parental leave. So not
Yes.
having kids, don't need the 16 weeks of paid parental leave. Is there typically in some industries wiggle room in I'd like more vacation time, but I'm not gonna have a baby on their
Right.
time.
Right, you can always ask. So different organizations are gonna handle this differently. I had when I was doing hiring in the last job, I had someone, she was already earning 3 weeks a year because she had been at her last place for a really long time. But coming to our organization, she was only gonna, I think, make half that. And she's like, it's really tough for me to go from having 3 weeks off a year to having a week and a half off a year. So I put that forward to our HR representatives and they said, sure, she can start that way. We'll call it there's a grandfathering clause, right? So we'll just call it that. And you can do that too sometimes with retirement matching is another one, where sometimes there'll be a little bit of wiggle room. It doesn't hurt to ask. You just have to be comfortable. If they tell you no, you have to decide if that's a deal breaker for you, right? Okay, let's get really quickly into the knowing your strategy. So at this point, we've talked about tactics to be data-driven and highly objective during your negotiation. For this step, we want to talk about strategies for if they start to ask, like, how much did you make your last job? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Tips for entering your negotiation. You want to bring notes. I come in with my actual note that I've handwritten all my notes in because that's how I do it. You want to remain positive and flexible. Remember, as we talked about, this is not a battle, it's just a conversation. You want to try not to take it personally. They don't know you well enough to be personal. If it's a new job, they don't know you well enough for it to be personal yet. Anticipate reactions and responses, right? So we would just like, how might they respond if I ask for more money? You want to have an argument ready, right? Have your value statement ready. But I always say, and this part's so important, your employer, this possible employer, has chosen you for this role. Again, I have done hiring for decades, and I can promise you that after I've rewritten the job description, got the posting out there, put together a committee, done a rubric to figure out what we want, had everybody meet the person, done the background check, called the references. I do not want to go through that again. That's your leverage. That is your leverage. Most organizations want this to be a done deal. And so if you can come with some reasonable asks, again, the worst they can say is no. Sometimes their hands are tied and they just don't have more money. That's where you ask about benefits. But they do not want this to fall apart at this point. So please know that. That's your leverage. And that will help you as you move forward. Do your homework, all of those things, and then here is where you start using that strategy. In the application phase, during an interview, you might be asked about salary history or expectations. We talked about this. Employers, our research that we've done show that the salary history question in the interview process or hiring process is one of the biggest and most pervasive reasons that the gender pay gap exists. So if I know how much you made at your last job, and I know that I have a range that's well above that, I might just lowball you 5,000 and think, great, she's gonna be real excited to come work for me, I'm giving her more money.
So never answer that question.
Never, if you can avoid it, don't answer that question. Sometimes it's in an online application. If you see that there, put in NA, put in 0, put in, don't answer it. If you have to put something in that line, like it's a mandatory field, do your research, figure out what the range is, and then put your range in your target salary in there. But that's a great point. I had this happen to me. I was in an interview process, and the president looked at me and said, well, what do you expect to make in this role? Luckily, I had done my research. I had looked up all the 990s, and so I knew what the top level, this was for a cabinet level position, I knew what the top level folks were making. And I did not lowball myself, and he was very surprised. But now I think about that, and I should not have answered that question. I should have said, I would really like to see them a good fit here, and look at the responsibilities, and then I will present you with that information. But in the moment, I at least had done my research, so I knew what to ask for. You had a question?
Yeah, so if the range that you shared earlier.
Yes.
If you give that range, is it wise to not pick the beginning of the range, but pick the midpoint of the range? Because what I think sometimes is they do want to lowball you. When you said your range was X.
Can we start down here?
Can
I
we
think
start down?
the key thing to remember there is that you're picking that range based on how, where you start, like what your target salary range is. So it would never be, like, you might only put your target salary range there, never your walkaway point, right? That's important to keep in I am so low on time, so I'm gonna go really, really fast through the next couple of slides. Some cities and states actually, prevent this from happening. There are laws, I'm sorry?
We are working on it in Virginia.
Thank you. We're working on it. If you want more information, like if you have friends, if you wanna share this information with, AAUW has information on our website about all of this. We're actually working on a scorecard for this. So, keep in mind, you can look that up. Let's see here, we talked about all those pieces. If you do find that you put a range and then you've realized now it's weeks later and your salary range is too low, you can always say, now that I've known more about the role, I really need to revisit that salary range, and here's what I think I can do. Deflection language, I'm not gonna read this to you, but these are, possible responses that you can have if there's a time when, they sort of push you in those interview spaces. To find your salary history. I mentioned that we talk a little bit about, raise and promotion. I will just point out for raise and promotion, I'll point out two quick things. One, time is really key. So find out what find out what the policies are about raise and promotion and whether that may affect your merit increase. That's a super important one. And we have that policy even at AAUW, that if you've just come on board, you're not eligible for a merit increase. So keep those things in mind. The second thing that I will mention is that if you are looking at a raise or promotion, you want to think about, maybe I want to do that during a time I just brought in a new client, I finished my doctoral degree, maybe I should ask for more money, those kinds of things, right? So consider when you might make that ask. Here's a sample pitch. It's basically just the value statements that we talked about and also your range. So this is just a little speech, right? Basically with all of the information that we just shared. You want to include a thank you, be enthusiastic, talk about your accomplishments, and then have your ask there. What is your range? And I see so many of you with your cameras out, your phones out. This is all available as well on our WorkSmart online program, so I'll share that with you as well. Oh, and the last thing I want to share about raise and promotion. If you've been in a role for 3 years or more, take out your old job description and all those things that you volunteered to do over the last 3 years that are now just in your job description that you are not being paid for. Write them all down, use track changes, and then when you go in for that merit increase opportunity conversation at the end of the year, this is what I've been doing, that's your sales pitch, I'd like to ask for a raise. All right, always get it in writing, super, super important. The last step, I don't want to shortchange it, but practice. If you have to, do a video, it's uncomfortable. Give yourself feedback, present it to a friend or significant other, your children, whatever you want to do, but definitely practice. The other thing I will say that you want to practice is that walkaway point. It is hard after this process to tell someone, thank you so much for your time and energy. I have really appreciated this process, but the salary is just too low. And I'm not going to be able to take this role. It's hard to say that. You want to practice that as well. So you want to practice all the value statements and your range and your ask, but you also want to practice that walkaway point if you can. Practice, practice, practice. These are just a review of the steps. Again, it's all available on our website. And this is that slide now. So this whole presentation is available to you. You can do it on your own time. You can start it and come back to it whenever you want. You can do it wherever you're living. Super, super helpful, and it has really great videos which actually show the interactions between a potential employer and the person who's applying for the job. So really great, helpful information. The workbook's available there. So definitely check out WorkSmart online. Here is our feedback tool, so let me know how we did.
All right, I am sorry, we're gonna have to end this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You will go back to the room you were in this morning, and Pastor Janet Day will be addressing us.
Thank you so much. Thank you all so much.